I'd played tons of video games, and the Nintendo 64 was the one console I proudly played for a significant part of my life, at least until my parents bought me a PS2. Nintendo 64 games are hit or miss. They were part of this weird transitional period of gaming, that jump from the 16-bit era to something that let us explore 3D worlds, and while they aren't the prettiest, they hold a very special place in my heart. As with all games, there are games that are too easy, and there are games that are too hard. And the topic of today's episode are games that are too hard. Games that are as hard as a hooker's work ethic on rent day, right? Games that will make you want to throw the controller faster than the speed of light into the wall and question your existence. Let's begin. Well, every list has to start somewhere, right? Superman 64 is a game I regretted renting as a kid. It's a game I regret ever existing on a fundamental level, and it's a game I regret ever buying again to beef up my Nintendo 64 library. Putting it on the shelf to me was like having Elrond yell at me to toss it in the lava at Mount Doom, and trust me, I would much prefer to do that. The difficulty of this game directly aligns with the fact that this is one of the worst games ever created, no more no less. It lacks any semblance of comprehensible control, a boring and unbelievable storyline, and graphics that make Bubsy 3D look like an escape. The game itself is based on Superman the Animated Series, but it has nothing to do with it outside of the character design. The closest thing to an actual episode is Season 2 Episode 14, where Brainiac creates a virtual world, but other than that, not so much. A majority of the game is trial and error, supplemented by some of the most tedious controls ever designed, and I'm not a fan of it in the slightest, and I doubt you'll find anyone who is. The reputation it has is 100% warranted, and I don't recommend that you play this. Ever. Just don't. The most recent Superman game was Superman Returns on the PS2, and most people think it's rough, but to me, it's not nearly as rough as Superman 64. One of the more hotter takes I've had on my channel was the belief that GoldenEye 007 is overrated, and guess what? I believe it is. Quality multiplayer does not a game make. 50% of a game that's good and the other half that's an experiment in the FPS world that was originally meant to be a rail shooter is not a passing grade. And yes, I've beaten GoldenEye, I've never streamed it, but I beat it as a kid, and so you'll probably see it at some point, but my opinion's never changed, it's always been the same. Now to me, while GoldenEye 007 was kind of Perfect Dark was the upgrade that made sense. I consider it fairly mid, but it is what it is. We play as Joanne Dark, who works for the Carrington Institute, and we go through a bunch of missions taking out Datadyne Corporation members who are engaging in illegal arms dealing. As the game goes on, we discover aliens, and you're gonna die. A lot. You'll die because the AI in Perfect Dark is a pretty damn responsive one. They'll take cover, they'll flank you, and the levels you go through are designed in such a way that it's very intricate. It's super easy to get lost or somehow find a secret path that you weren't supposed to. You'll have to manage both your ammo and health, and nothing is worse than not having the ammo you need before you stumble upon a Datadyne fire team. Trust me. The most recent Perfect Dark was Perfect Dark on a 360, which was included in the Rare Replay, which if you want a good anthology, check out the Rare Replay. It consistently boggles my mind that people enjoy Glover. This is a personal purchase of mine from my childhood because in the Nintendo 64 era, there was one of two things I ate during the school year: Campbell's soup and any comprehensible format of hamburger helper. I swear to God. So me being me, I saw Glover and was like, hamburger helper. And yeah, I bought this. I knew what to expect. It was a platformer. Any game that had some lovable character seemed to be a platformer or some derivative of it. Now, originally I liked this. As a kid, the ball physics were weird, but I didn't put much mind into it. It's when you actually get into the game and the levels become cheap aberrations of what is physically possible on the Nintendo 64 that you tend to run into issues. Controlling Glover is weird. In some ways, it doesn't feel right. You're basically controlling a ball and occasionally you have to slap the ball or throw it, and you can even change it to different balls if you really wanted to. The ball bearing is smaller and faster, the bowling ball does more damage and breaks down your barriers, and the crystal ball is what you use if you want to have a really fucking bad time. To me, Glover is just a goofy ass game that was different, I can give it that, but the camera and the level design is beyond frustrating. And to beat this, it's a chore. I've never enjoyed Glover, and beating it was closure from my childhood that I thought I would never experience. It's that difficult. Oh hey, another rare game. So I played this as a kid, but I didn't really understand it. It was so hard to find this as a rental. You were lucky to see it. Kids were renting the shit out of it. So when it came time for me to run inside a Blockbuster, I would book it to the Nintendo 64 section to see if it was there. And one time, I lucked out. Blast Corps is a big game. It has like 57 levels, and as an action game, it has tons of puzzles. Our whole job is to destroy things, but for the life of me, I could never figure out what I needed to do. Honestly, this game is charming in its own way, from destroying things in front of a nuclear carrier to clearing debris on the moon. There's really no limit to what you can do. Now, people love this game. It does have a certain charm, I'll give it that, but it is incredibly difficult. The controls can be decent until they aren't. And most of the time that occurs in like precision instances. And the camera, it's stuck the way that it is. We have some insane time pressure and the difficulty can't be adjusted. This is a game where the learning curve is extremely steep, and in some ways, it can be considered trial and error. If you want a game that'll challenge you, is fun, but does need a little bit of extra brain power to deal with how unfair it is, Blast Corps is definitely for you. This game was the meat and bones of my childhood. I remember living in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Jefferson Arms apartment complex off of Jefferson Highway in a small apartment. One day, around Christmas, Dad handed me a catalog and told me to circle the things that I wanted. That's something that we did in the 90s, and in some ways my kids still do it today. I picked the usual things: a new bike, some super cool rollerblades, a science kit. But much like most kids of the late 90s and early 2000s, I knew what I wanted was on the last page: the video games. Ocarina of Time was one of my favorite games ever. It blew my mind, and still to this day, I regard it as one of my favorite games of all time. But I saw something that made my jaw drop: Majora's Mask, a second Zelda game on the Nintendo 64. I circled it at least 50 times, and I woke up on Christmas and I saw a box and I knew the shape. I knew my day was about to be fucking epic. I made sure it was the last box I opened. I ripped it open, and before my very eyes was Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. I wish that I was joking. I'm not. At some point I did get the game, I don't remember exactly when, and I even had the Prima strategy guide for it. Majora's Mask is a different game from Ocarina. It's darker, and as a kid, I didn't really put two and two together, but as an adult, I appreciate it. Now, what makes this game so hard is we have an extremely obvious time pressure with the 3-day cycle. That's the gimmick. At first, it really doesn't matter, but as the game goes on, it can be incredibly difficult to do everything you need to do if you mess up exact events. The dungeons are the same way. One dungeon that comes to mind is the Great Bay Temple, which is a water temple. And if you mess up, even with a Song of Slow Time, you're only going to get 2 chances at best before you have to do the entire temple all over again. It was always interesting to see how people remember DMA design. Some folks remember them for Lemmings, some for Grand Theft Auto, and in my case, it was Space Station Silicon Valley, which was on the Nintendo 64. Another game on the Nintendo 64 that DMA design did was Body Harvest. Now, I've never played this. It's rated T for teen, and I know I've mentioned it before, but if it was rated T, I couldn't play it, unless it was Star Wars. Then my dad was okay with it. My grandmother was very adamant about enforcing that rule, and even when I became a teenager, I would get knife-cutting side-eyes from the violence of even Medal of Honor. Body Harvest, though, it's a tough asshole of a game. Basically, we play as Adam Drake, a genetically engineered soldier, and his whole job is to investigate and eliminate an alien attack force that shows up to shit on Earth every 25 years. Basically, what they do is they harvest the population, so what we need to do is use a time machine, go around and prevent that from happening, but good luck doing it. The game makes you use vehicles, but those vehicles have fuel, and literally every single other consumable such as ammo and health are limited. The aliens come out from anywhere and are incredibly unpredictable. The checkpoint system is absolutely fucked, and the controls are not where I would want it to be for the Nintendo 64. Donkey Kong 64 was an impressive game to me for a few reasons. Growing up, I knew Donkey Kong as a mean-ass monkey. I played the arcade game, the Game Boy game, and even had Donkey Kong Land as well, which was also on the Game Boy. But seeing Donkey Kong and his friends was awesome. They all had their own weapons, their own music, their own attacks. It was smart to use certain Kongs in certain situations. But under the skin of this game, there's a much more evil thing: the collectathon. Throughout the game, we'll need to collect bananas to unlock the boss stage, and banana medals, which we need 15 of, coins to purchase upgrades, keys from the bosses to unlock other stages, and golden bananas, and 2 obnoxious as fuck coins from 2 very poorly emulated arcade games, Jetpack and Donkey Kong. Now let me tell you something, playing Donkey Kong with a Nintendo 64 controller is not fun, and Jetpack is even worse. I did manage to do it as an adult, but as a kid, there was no way I was going to unlock it. Add in the fact that you need to beat Donkey Kong twice, by the way, once with normal lives and once with only 1 life. It's a game that quickly becomes a chore because you're searching high and low for all of these collectibles in a game that currently holds the world record for the most collectibles in a video game. By the way, that record still stands to this day, and I doubt any other company wants to even try to beat it. Nobody would be interested. The era of collectathons, it died in the late 90s, early 2000s. Remember how I said my dad would only let me rent T for Teen games if it was Star Wars? That era on the Nintendo 64 rendered some badass experiences for me, such as Rogue Squadron, Episode 1 Racer, and of course Shadows of the Empire, which was a game that my dad took interest in because he was huge on reading and collecting expanded universe books. I knew all about the plot and adventures of Dash Rendar from talking to my dad before I even had the chance to play it. To me, this was massive. I had never played a Star Wars game like this. Most of them involved me piloting pod racers or vehicles, as most of the games in the universe stemmed from flying around, think Battle of Naboo or Starfighter, and of course Rogue Squadron. Dash Rendar shot things and he didn't miss, the auto aim was cool, and I worked all the way through the game and made it to the end, just to get shit on because I didn't have the difficulty high enough. Fine, sure. Change the difficulty, deal with some incredibly aggressive boss figures that can kill you in 2 seconds, make it to the end, get a bad ending because the difficulty wasn't high enough! You want to beat this on Jedi? Good fucking luck. But if you do, you get the proper special cutscene. Oh, also, fuck Disney for making expanded universe known as Legends now. You cut off an entire legacy of lore for what? Money? Eat ass. Jetforce Gemini was one of the first Nintendo 64 games I ever streamed. I had never played it, and I didn't really know that it existed as a kid. I'd never heard of it. I was stoked. It reminded me a lot of Shadows of the Empire, being able to run around and do whatever I wanted to do. There were these cool little bonus missions. There were tons of levels. Then I realized this is a Rare game, in the era where Rare wanted you to invest 100+ hours straight in bullshit. I made it all the way to the end of the game before being told by King Jeff of the Tribals that you can't fight the final boss until you go and collect every single tribal from every single level. It's the side quest to end all side quests. And this is a problem with Rare, it's always been. Donkey Kong 64, collect everything. Diddy Kong Racing, collect everything. Banjo-Kazooie, collect everything. Conker's Bad Fur Day, collect everything. And now from across 15 levels I've already completed and struggled to beat to find these furry little fucks that hide very well. It's such a kick in the taint to make it to the end of the game and be told, hey, thanks, but do this too. Rayman did it on the PS1 as well, but I was able to use a cheat code to at least get to the final boss of that game. To my knowledge, outside of using the Game Shark for the Nintendo 64, there is no way of cheating to unlock the final fight. You have to meticulously go back and scan the entire stage for these tribals, and if they die, you start the level over again. FZero historically has been a difficult racing game, and it's a great game. Even better franchise if you ask people. The original one is single player. When you beat it, there's really no replayability, but F-Zero X, major upgrade. We have 30 racers we can unlock, each with their own stats. Now we start with 6, and we slowly unlock more by completing the cups and winning challenges. And the races, they are notoriously difficult. FZero is all about going as fast as you possibly can while balancing damage control and speeding past your rivals. We're going 1,000 kilometers per hour in the game, and at those speeds, handling becomes an issue, and crashing or flying off the stage is a possibility. With the later cups, the AI becomes more aggressive, and you'll need to streamline your playstyle to get damn near perfect habits in balancing your energy in that turbo. I was excited to check it out as a kid because Captain Falcon was in Super Smash Bros., right? And that game was a family favorite. Falcon, punch! If you want a solid racing game that isn't Diddy Kong or Mario Kart, then this is the one for you. But understand, it is the most challenging racing game on the Nintendo 64, and in my opinion, the hardest game in the library. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this list? What are your favorite difficult Nintendo 64 games? I know that the comment section will be chocked to the brim with, Nintendo 64 sucks! And yeah, it kinda does. But hey, I'm sure we can afford to sneak in just a little bit of productive talk about the Nintendo 64 and its library. By the way, if you made it to the end of this video, you're home in our community. A community that is chocked to the brim with video game enthusiasts that love to remember a time in their lives where it was a little bit easier to live. And if that's what you align with, I would love to have you here. Finally, the most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.